The US dollar has been the world's dominant reserve currency since 1944. But can it retain this position? It seems not, because the BRICS de-dollarization campaign is gaining more traction and many more countries, especially in the global south, have jumped on its train. Recently, Nigeria, one of Africa's strongest economies, has become the latest country to implement the BRICS de-dollarization policy by selling its crude oil in its local currency. This is fantastic, but it begs the question, why did Nigeria decide to ditch the US dollar for the Naira, given the fact that it has a fairly stable relationship with the US? What does Nigeria have to gain from selling its crude in Naira? And what does this mean for Africa? Let's find out. At the beginning of this month, the Nigerian Finance Minister, Wale Edun, confirmed in a recent post on X that Nigeria would begin to sell crude oil to the recently established Dangote refinery and other local refineries in the country's local currency, the Naira. This move, approved in July by the Federal Executive Council, ensures that 450,000 barrels of crude oil allocated for domestic use are sold in Naira rather than dollars. You see, the Nigerian economy is largely determined by its major resource, crude oil. The sale of crude oil in dollars for decades has consistently weakened the Nigerian local currency against the dollar in the international market. This is the case with every other African country's economies. Despite the implementation of the monetary policies and practices suggested by the Western-led IMF and World Bank, the local currency has remained weak, leading to high rates of inflation and a high cost of living. Recently, the Naira dollar rates have reached unprecedented levels, exacerbating the situation and driving up the cost of basic commodities. This was what prompted the senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, to advise the Nigerian government to ditch the US dollar and follow the practice of BRICS. According to Femi Falana, one way to strengthen the dollar is for the federal government to follow BRICS' ideals of de-dollarization and sell crude oil in local currency, the Naira, and not the US dollar. The state advocate called on the government to ignore predictions made by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, and begin working alongside BRICS theology to strengthen Nigeria's native economy and local currencies. He added that Nigeria must join BRICS and begin selling oil in local currency, the Naira, and not the US dollar. This way, Naira will be in demand, and the demand will boost the value of Naira. With the recent news announced by the finance minister, it would appear that the Nigerian government heeded the words of Mr. Femi Falana. By refining its crude oil locally and selling in Naira, Nigeria aims to save billions of dollars that would be spent on fuel imports, thereby stabilizing the dollar exchange rate. This move would also stabilize pump prices, potentially resulting in lower and more predictable fuel costs for the country's citizens. And overall, it would lead to the general improvement of the Nigerian economy as the cost of things would reduce. However, it is pretty much surprising that Nigeria would make this move, because historically, and even in the present times, Nigeria has had a stable relationship with the West, particularly the US. Unlike the countries in the Central Sahel, where they have ditched the West in favor of non-Western countries, Nigeria has shown no indication of breaking away from the West. However, in a surprising turn of events, the country has indicated that it wants to join the BRICS alliance. This was revealed last year after the BRICS summit.
Now, if you're looking for a really good investment, I would suggest investing in yourself by getting yourself educated at Blinkist.com. Blinkist is a productivity app used condenses the best inside nonfiction books into just 15 minutes. You can save time, money, and learn new things faster than ever. Use it for self-improvement, business insights, entrepreneurship, development, and many other areas. You get access to all of the titles while offline, and they have full-length audiobooks, so check them out.
Did you know that with just one bank transfer to your decoder's bank account number, your cable subscription gets renewed instantly? I'm sure you're wondering, transfer to my decoder's account? Well, yes. Just like you and I, your decoder has its own bank account. Transferring to it doesn't just give you instant value, but you would never have to pay a 100 Naira convenience fee again. Now, to get your decoder's account number, Simply dial *6606*1#. Select the option to get account details, select cable TV, and then select your provider. Finally, enter your decoder's smart card number. Congratulations! Sure, you've gotten the account number by now. Transfer to renew subscription and save it for your next purchase. And remember, your decoder's account number is permanent and can also be reused.
Summit, which added 2 African countries, Egypt and Ethiopia, as part of its new members. It seems that despite Nigeria's stable relationship with the US, it, like every other African country, is looking for something better. Since BRICS is offering countries a multipolar world, free from the domination of a few Western countries, Nigeria has decided to jump ship and move with BRICS. This is why in 2018 May, Nigeria agreed to sign a major deal with India, one of the founding members of BRICS. Both countries would use their local currencies instead of the dollar for bilateral trade. According to the statement released by the Indian commerce industry, both countries undertook a detailed review of recent developments in bilateral trade and investment ties and identified several areas of focus for enhancing both bilateral trade as well as mutually beneficial investments. These include resolving market access issues of both sides and cooperation in key sectors such as crude oil and natural gas, pharmaceuticals, Unified Payments Interface, UPI, and local currency settlement system, among others. The meeting ended with both sides agreeing to the early conclusion of the local currency settlement system agreement to further strengthen bilateral economic ties. Now, according to the Nigerian spokesperson, India's Jindal Steel and Power has committed to pump $3 billion into Nigeria's steel sector, and Indorama Corp plans to invest an additional $8 billion to expand its petrochemical facility in Nigeria. Meanwhile, Nigeria approved a $1 billion partnership agreement with the Indian government to help the Defense Industries Corporation of Nigeria attain 40% self-sufficiency in local manufacturing and production of defense equipment in 3 years. All these agreements between India and Nigeria indicate that both countries are committed to bolstering trade ties, and the recent local currency settlement system agreement, signed by both countries, is a step in that direction. The decision to trade without the dollar comes as both countries are currently facing pressure from international markets and have decided to join forces to face these challenges. However, it would interest you to know that Nigeria is not the only African country that has hopped on the BRICS de-dollarization campaign. In February this year, Egypt announced that it had officially ditched the dollar in trade and embraced trading in local currency. But unlike Nigeria, it shouldn't be surprising that Egypt made this move, because during the last BRICS summit, Egypt became one of the newest members of BRICS. Speaking on the news, Egypt's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that Egypt will work to urge countries it trades with to use national currencies to lessen the burden of the rising cost of utilizing foreign currencies for settlements. It further added that the decision was a result of a global economic shift. Indeed, they noted the international crises over the past 4 years as a major development in its decision. As a result, Egypt noted that the change in trade currency is rooted in similar factors that have pushed the same action in many other BRICS nations. Egypt's move to ditch the dollar in trade is in line with the BRICS bloc's strategic move towards de-dollarization, and by joining forces with BRICS, Egypt is charting a new course that deviates from the traditional economic paradigms dominated by the dollar. Now, prior to making this decision, the economy of Egypt was on the verge of collapse, easily affected by external events such as pandemics and political battles. In fact, since the beginning of 2022, over 70% of the value of the Egyptian pound has been lost. This economic slowdown has led to the growth of a black market, where the value of the Egyptian pound has dropped dramatically, further worsening the situation. By the end of 2022, a big drop occurred in the central bank's funds, as it went from $44.6 billion in 2019 to $32 billion. So given this tough economic
Want to travel the world from your sofa? ExpressVPN is your passport to online freedom. Appear to be in any of 94 countries in just one tap. Download and start your free trial now.
Climate, the decision to stop using the US dollar in trade deals makes a lot of sense because it will help to protect the economy from the ups and downs of the foreign exchange markets and the scary threat of rising foreign debt. This change will likely change how Egypt's economy works, making way for a more stable and self-sufficient banking system. Zimbabwe is another African country that has made promising steps to ditch the dollar. The Southern African country applied to join BRICS, and after which proceeded to apply for loans at the BRICS Bank, the new development bank. The BRICS Bank confirmed that they aim to start dispersing loans in local currencies to help developing countries end dependency on the US dollar. Following this announcement, Zimbabwe started to accumulate tons of gold in its central bank reserves in a similar fashion to that of the BRICS alliance. The reason for this is that Zimbabwe intends to back its local currency, the Zimbabwean dollar, with gold. Currently, the majority of the population in Zimbabwe uses the US dollar for daily transactions. However, with the decision to back local currency with gold, things could take a U-turn and reduce reliance on the US dollar. Zimbabwe's move takes a leaf from the playbook of BRICS, which also considers backing their yet-to-be-released currency with gold. This means that gold could play an important role in the functioning of BRICS, Zimbabwe, and other developing countries. Now, what does all this mean for Africa as a whole? The move made by Nigeria to ditch the dollar is the beginning of a new trend. As you know, more and more African countries have indicated interest in joining the BRICS alliance. This is because the use of the dollar for trade has severely affected the ability of African countries to cope with internal challenges because they do not have control over their own monetary policy. Ronnie Nswadi, the professor and director of the School of Economics, Development Studies, and Tourism at the South African Nelson Mandela University, explains it well when he says that reliance on the US dollar brings about the external dependency on the stability and policies of the US financial system. In his own words, when the US sneezes, everybody catches the fever, and depending on the US dollar currency exchange rate does dampen the growth in our African continent. Relying on the US dollar is the major reason why the majority of local currencies in Africa are weak and performing poorly, leading to the high cost of living that is now rampant in the African economy. It also makes the African market dominated by commodity products, vulnerable to global economic shocks, leading to inefficient trade. This means that the obvious solution is to ditch the dollar so that local currencies in Africa can be strengthened. So by making the move to sell its crude oil in its local currency, Nigeria is undoubtedly pushing other African countries to take the same path. I mean, if a country like Nigeria that has a stable relationship with the US can ditch the dollar for trade, then other African countries can do the same. If it so happens that all African countries start to trade in their local currency, imagine what it would do to the dominance of the dollar. There is no doubt that Nigeria has set a path that other African countries would begin to thread. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below.
Preview.